Hi, welcome to Chad's Silversmithing. First, thanks for visiting my channel. I really appreciate you coming by. If you wouldn't mind hitting the like button, that helps get my channel promoted. I also love it, and it also helps if you leave comments too, so I'd appreciate it if you'd let me know what you thought of the video. Today, I came into some really pretty amethyst from a friend. She gave them to me, and I'm trying to do justice to some, just how pretty some of these stones are, so I'm going to try and make some really elegant looking kind of ornate-ish drop earrings out of four actually pieces of amethyst that are really pretty. So thanks, Bobby. Before we get started on this though, I'd like to thank my YouTube subscribers. We passed 5,700 I think. But I really appreciate all of your support, both the nice comments and the suggestions, when you buy me a coffee, that kind of thing really helps out a lot. So thank you for that. I also wanted to thank my patrons over on Patreon. They're a really nice group of people who are buying my premium content. I've met so many nice people over there, and there's just such a well of knowledge there. I've learned so many things from them as well. So thank you guys, I appreciate that, and I really like chatting with you guys. So thanks for your support. All right. Let's get started on this project. Alright, let me show you the stones first here. I got two of these beautiful teardrop ones and two of these oval ones, and they're all pretty good sized. I think this one is a 15 by 11 and this one's 11 by 9 or something like that. So but I'm going to set those together in each earring like that. And let me show you in my little design book what I drew up. These are really nice too, by the way. I've come to depend on this in order to come up with my designs. I'm not very good at keeping things symmetrical, so having the little grid pattern on here is really useful. So they're in my merch store if you're interested. So this is what I'm going to do. I'm putting them upside down just so I can set them flat. Put them like that. I'm going to use some 16 gauge wire to kind of frame this one, and I may put a little piece in the middle if there's too big of a gap, or some balls or something, I'm not sure. But definitely going to do little tiny balls all the way around the outside of this one. And then we'll just put a jump ring on top. I'm going to use 22 gauge sheet for the back, and I'm going to build up a platform for the stone to sit up on a little bit, a little kind of a step for these, the girdle of the stone to sit on. And I'm going to use extra tall bezel for this. I have some 1/4 inch because these are really deep stones, and so we'll use that. And then we'll also cut out the back of these. I normally just make the bezel from the get-go open backed, and I could do it that way, but I want these sitting on top of a piece of sheet, I think, for this particular design. So we'll give that a try. I think first let's make some bezels for these. If you want to see a more detailed thing about making bezels for faceted stones, I'll put a link right up there for you. Okay, let's start with the oval one. If you've never seen my videos before, I generally use hard silver sheet solder for pretty much everything. And I use a spray-on flux called My-T-Flux. And this is fine silver bezel strip. It's 1/4 inch. This is pretty thin. This is 28 gauge, I think. I prefer it if it was 26, but I don't have any of that on hand right now. So this will work just fine now. Just neatening up the end. I always, with faceted stones, I set them on their top like that. That way they'll sit better. You're measuring for your bezel. Trying to ride up on the side over here, so I'm just going to kind of hold it down flat like that so I can get a pretty accurate measurement on the size of the stone. As always, I'm going to leave just a little bit extra on there. I guess we might as well Might as well go ahead and cut the bezel for this one while we're doing this. I'll do the other two off camera so you don't have to watch me duplicate myself over and over again. The only thing different when you're doing something with a point like this is you don't want to end the bezel at the point, so I'm going to make a sharp bend in advance. I don't end up with problems at the tip there. Then we should be able to just kind of wrap it around like that. You want to make sure it's pretty tight in there. I'm just going to file the ends of these both flat. The ends I didn't already file anyway. If you have a miter vise, this would be one of those situations where you could use that if you'd like. I always find it's easier to solder these if you make them into angular shapes. You never want a solder joint on a corner. Not for bezels anyway. Oops. There you are. Where did my tweezers go? Pretty good on size, I think, on that one. I'm just going to use one of these sharp bends that I made to make the bezel as my starting point. I could hit it on the nose, probably. It's snug, but not too snug to sit flat. So. Okay, I'm going to make these two real quick off camera. Okay, I got the other bezels made. So now we got to come up with our decorations, I think. So, I think let's do the little swirly thing first. So I got to figure. I'm going to use 16 gauge round wire for that. This is just a piece of 18 gauge I'm using as a guide. That's pretty close. I'm going to cut it just a little bit longer than that. Straighten this out. I'm going to use that as a guide to measure these other two pieces. We'll see how it comes out. Okay, so here's some of that 16 gauge. I'm going to cut a piece of that. that length. I'm going to make one first, and if it works out right, then I'll just cut a second one and do the same thing. If you ever want to do a tight spiral on something, I find it's best to get that end hooked over. Doing a tight spiral, you hold it tight and then turn it. Ouch. Do that. This looks way too long to me. Let's see once we put it around that oval stone. I have a thought. Let's use the oval jump ring band. I have one around here somewhere. Okay, so I think I need to shorten these by about 3/16 of an inch on each side. So like 5 millimeters times 2. Let's cut one of those and see how it comes out. That looks pretty good. I think I'm going to cut a second one of that. Make that one too. I think those are pretty good. This one's sitting a little bit off. I think that's pretty good. The other thing I'm going to need to do here is make a bunch of little balls. And so I'll show you a trick that I do for that sometimes. Set these off to the side for now. I need to make a whole bunch of little tiny balls. You can buy that wire that looks like a series of balls together. That would save you having to do this. Well, I think it looks like wire that is made out of little balls. But the trade-off is that if you don't get all of the individual balls soldered down very well, one of your balls might fall off, and that's embarrassing. Nobody likes to have their balls fall off after you sell the product. One of the things that I do is I'll use some scrap wire sometimes, like it's a piece of 18 gauge that's left over from something. So if you drill a hole, like say you find the length of wire that makes for a perfect ball, and you drill a hole just that depth, then you can just stick a piece of wire in there and just keep cutting off equal sized pieces. It's way easier than trying to hold up another one to judge or to use a ruler to measure. This is great if you need to make a whole bunch. So, okay, if you've never made balls before, it seems to make better balls if you do it on a charcoal block, so I keep them around just for that purpose. Something about it makes them nice and round with little flat bottoms, which is perfect for what we're doing today. Don't ever pick these up while they're still red because they'll squish a little bit. Using that strategy is great if you have a hard time getting equal sized balls. Nobody wants to have random sized balls on their piece. You want them to be symmetrical. Okay, so I'm going to make a few more of those and then I'll be right back. Okay, so I spent a little bit of time shaping these a little bit better and making sure they're laying pretty flat. And the next thing I'm going to do is I'm going to flux them, and then I'm going to put some solder on the inside, and I'm also going to lean a bit on the outside over here. I'm doing the bezels too, well, at least one on each one at a time, so that I can get them lined up straight with the other bezel when I put the second bezel on. And then we'll be just trimming off the excess. So, but we also have to put balls around the other ones, so let's make sure we have enough room there. I laid it out next to the drawing I had to decide how big a piece of sheet to cut here. Alright, let's flux it and get this stuff going. I always like to heat it a little bit past where the point where that flux goes through the bubbly stage and then settles back down into that kind of flat syrupy stage. That way it's easier to get your pieces of solder where you want them to be. So I'm going to throw maybe 3 in each one on the inside. I'm going to kind of make sure they're touching the sides and the bottom. I'm just going to lean a few. The outside here. If you have trouble getting them to lean up against there, you can, and I'll probably do this when I turn my torch back on. Once you heat that flux again, it'll get kind of sticky, and you can use that kind of to hold your solder in place if it keeps sliding off. So let's start with that and we'll see how it goes. I'll use my pick to tip them back up there. Like I said, the flux starts to get sticky, and it'll usually stay in place then. There we go. I also have some extra over here in case I need some more. I can just use my pick to pick it up and pick solder it. By the way, if you've never tried pick soldering is a really useful skill. I'll put a link up here for a video if you want to learn how to do that. It really makes things faster. Make sure we have contact all the way down. You can always go back, like I said, and add some solder if we need to. Okay. So now let's make sure everything's still stayed pretty flat. It's always harder to solder stuff down to things if it's not in contact all the way around the base. looks pretty good. I'm going to solder those down, and then I'm going to start adding those balls all the way around. So let's make sure we have plenty of solder to get these attached. I'm just giving it a little tap in case there's any space between the bezel and the sheet anywhere so that it runs the entire seam. Okay, I think those are soldered on. I'll cool those off a little bit. It might be conducive to having these stay better in place if I put a little flux on there at the start, just so they have something that'll kind of hold them in place as I put them here. I'm going to start right up next to that little curl there. I'm going to cut a bunch of little solder here. So for these ones, I don't want them to be too glommed up with solder. I have my pick handy because as the flux boils, it tends to move the balls. So it's there in case I need to push them back in the position where I want them to be, which generally you have to. Okay, so now I'm going to pick solder these just because it's easier for me. You could just lean some pieces up against there. It goes a little faster for me if I do it this way. So the reason people's balls fall off generally is because the balls have very little mass, and so it's easy to get them up to the temperature where the solder will flow onto the ball, but in order for it to really stick to things, you got to get the rest of the piece up to the 1450 degrees that hard solder requires for it to really stick to something. So I always tell people when they're soldering a whole bunch of balls on, after they think they're done, go back and really pick at them with your fingernail when they're cold, or even with a pair of pliers or tweezers, and see if you can't pry them off of there. Better that you pry them off when you're still working on it so you can fix it than later on when you have to go back to the drawing board. a little tight squeeze on this last one, so I'm trying to kind of position them so it looks good. Okay, hope that looks good. I'll do the other one and be right back. There's three things left to do, basically. I'll let these clean up for a little while. I already tried to pick all of these to make sure that they wouldn't come off and they were soldered on there well. And I would recommend doing that before you move any further. So the last things I need to do, trim off the excess sheet here, which I'll do some with the cutters and some I'll just file probably. I'm going to create a little platform out of square wire that goes around the inside edge of each of these bezels. So I'll make those and then we'll solder them in when I come back. And then we'll add a jump ring on the top and saw out the inside portion of those sheets. And then we'll let them pickle. And then we'll be pretty much done except for polishing and setting the stones. So let's trim this off. I know this is bad, and don't do this, it's terrible. But sometimes you can use these little wire cutters to get in little corners like this to get those out of there pretty easily. Or at least get the majority of that without having to resort to using your saw. So if I can eliminate the need to do some sawing, I'm always down for that. So see, I get most of it. Then I can use a ball burr on the Dremel and just clean that up. Or you can use your bastard file, the corner of it, and get in between each of these balls from the bottom like that. And you can get a nice neat seam there. So I'm going to finish cleaning those up, and I'll make those little platforms for in there, and then I'll come back and we'll saw those out and add a jump ring. So I got those cleaned up pretty well. I think while I'm soldering these down, I might as well solder the jump rings on. So let me find... I'm going to use this 18 gauge that I used to measure part of this earlier. I'm getting a little hungry. I think I might, while these are pickling, go make a tuna casserole or something. That sounds kind of good. So I'm going to cut a little bit more solder, so I'm ready to go for all of these. Alright, I'm going to throw a few pieces of solder inside of each of these, so I can solder in that platform. Maybe. I don't need that on there anymore. Okay, go saw. Alright, welcome to my messy sawing area. I went ahead and I drilled holes through both sides, and then I'm just going to feed the saw through and then just cut those out. I'll be cleaning those up with the file where that square wire meets. But let's see how the stones look. Okay, you can see how that's going to look. I think that'll be pretty. So I'm going to go ahead and cut out the other one, and then I'm going to heat these a little and throw them in the pickle for a while and maybe make myself a casserole. And then I'll come back and finish these. Let's go ahead and set these stones. I already filed these down to the correct height for these stones. And so I'm just going to go ahead and set them. Mostly it's just pushing down the edges until it quits moving around, and then you can really lay them down over it. But you got to file it just to the right height, so it's just barely above the girdle of the stone. This stage is called burnishing. It just kind of pushes that edge right down over the girdle really tightly. The one thing I like to do when I'm doing something that has a point, it's always hardest to get that tip bent down nicely over the tip of a marquee or a pear-shaped stone when you're doing a bezel. So if you thin out the bezel just a little bit at the top there, sometimes that makes it easier to push that over the edge of the stone there. So. Probably oxidize these to bring out some of the details. I think those came out really nice, so I'll do that and I'll take some better pictures at the end and we'll be done. Okay, well, that was the elegant drop earrings, or I'm not sure if we're going to call it that or not, but that's the way I think of them. I hope you enjoyed that. If you did, make sure to hit that like button. That really helps out a great deal. I'd love it if you'd explore some of my other videos. I've got about 220-ish now, I think. I've been putting out 3 a week for over a year, so there's quite a bit of content, both for beginners or more people who are more advanced, as well as kind of in the middle. Peruse the playlist. That's a good way to find stuff that might be suitable for your level. But after you look at a few, come back and subscribe to my channel. I really appreciate it. Alright, well, check out the links in the video description down below. There's a number of them, including my link to my Patreon. So thanks for coming by. Take care. Happy silversmithing.